Okay, so we've just got a couple of minutes to go and people are still trickling in, so I'll wait till another minute or two to get started.
There's something with, I think, the link. It's having people log into Outlook to then get access to it.
Say this again?
I think there's something with the link that's on the Blackboard. It's having people log into Outlook to then get access.
Jeez, I didn't know that. So are they able to get on, or they're not able to?
I'm not sure. I think obviously some people are jumping on. I'll check if the WhatsApp.
Okay, let me see if I can figure this out. Okay. Let's see, I can try emailing the link to everybody. Again, I mean, people have gotten it by email already, but
No, I think people are getting in now. Let me just double check because it was having an issue for me, but now I'm in, so I think everybody else is in.
say this again. I didn't quite understand. I couldn't quite hear you.
She says she's gonna double check. She was having issues and she got on. So she thinks that other people should be able to get on. I hope I said that correctly. I don't know if you're still on.
Okay.
You did say it correctly. I think everybody's getting in now. So I guess give them a couple of seconds, but I think everybody's getting in now.
Oh, okay, good. We've got about half the class here. So Joyce, are you saying that that's wrong? That the meeting ID is wrong or something? I don't quite follow. All right, let me send it around again. Maybe there's a way to get more people in if we
The meeting ID and passwords are correct. It's just a link that's a little messed up.
I see. Let's see if I have a way to
Everybody that responded to me said yes, they're in. So I don't know
okay,
what's going
all
on.
right. We're still getting a few people trickling in. Give it another minute and then get started. Oh dear. All right. Can you get the email? I had sent an email around. I'd resend it, but let me see if I can resend it directly from Blackboard, from the email. I'm just going to try to resend the email to in case people. Okay, here we are. I'm just going to resend the Zoom information in case it helps. I do email as well as put it on Blackboard. Maybe I'll just email it from now on. It. I seem to remember last semester there was problems when I posted it on Blackboard too. Okay, let's do 3210. Close email. Okay, I'm emailing it to everybody. Okay, so this I'm just taking from the other email. All right, hopefully that'll get more people in. All right. Okay, well, we've got about half the class here at least, so we'll get started. No, I think the link I emailed is right, like there's 32 people here. I can't believe it was wrong. No, I send a different email each time. So the email on August 20th was superseded by the one I sent the following week. I send a new one each week. So don't use the old one. I'm sending you a new one. You should go to the new one. All right, so hopefully more people will get on. I'm sorry for the mix-up. I'm not sure what the cause of it is. Today is September 3rd, and we're in the second session now. I send a new link each week, so just check your email for the new link. Tonight we're going to do the second lesson in the text in the course, and it's based on chapter 5 in the textbook. And we're going to talk a little bit about personality. It's important to understand your personality. I don't think the theory of personality will change your life one way or the other, but I do think that if you're able to understand your personality better, you can become more self-aware. If you're more self-aware, you develop better emotional intelligence. You're better able to understand how you differ from people. You're better able to understand how your prejudices bias you towards others, and what your. Yes, I send a new link every week. So I'm not sure if that's the cause of the mix-up, but don't. I just create a new link each time and send it. So expect a new link. I send an email. It came in the email. So I do send emails all the time, and you should have access. If you haven't received emails from me, check the email account that's listed in Brooklyn, what's it called? The Brooklyn portal. They have a name for it, like Web Central, I think they call it Web Central. And so you should make sure you have the correct email address in there. I send email links to your email address. Whatever email address you have in Web Central is where the emails go. I'm not psychic. I can't know what your email address is unless it's listed there. So basically, you have to have the right email address in the thing, and you get emails. And every week I'll send you an email. I thought I had said that last time, and it'll have the link to the thing. So just get that email and use the link. All right, so basically tonight we're going to talk a little bit about personality. Your case study in the chapter 5, the rise and fall of Theranos, is about that another one of these sort of kooky psychopaths, Elizabeth Holmes. It's nice to know both genders. excuse my lack of political correctness. Well, anyway, males and females are able to both be psychopaths, because Elizabeth Holmes definitely fell into the same camp as our friend Jeff Skilling. And as you watch the Enron movie, you'll see that the Enron folks fit many of the definitions, many of the characteristics of psychopathy, of psychopathy or psychopaths. We'll talk about that in connection with the dark triad, which is one of the kinds of personality traits that are worth talking about. So basically, personality is the sum of ways in which an individual reacts to and interacts with the world. Personality traits are relatively constant, they're enduring, and they can be changed only gradually. So we may not be happy with aspects of our personality, but we need to work on changing them. So there are certain, most of the time, most personality traits are just, some people are one way and other people are another way, and it's not really a major thing. However, some personality traits really do make a difference. And if you can work on them over a long period of time, you might be able to change them. One of these is locus of control. Locus of control means like whether you take responsibility for what happens to you or you blame everyone else. So you screw up in something, we all do. And when you do, whether you screw up, you blame the screw up on your partner or your friend or your spouse or whatever, or you blame the screw up on yourself. If you take responsibility for what happens to you, and all entrepreneurs have a very strong internal locus of control. So the idea is if you take responsibility, you've got internal. If you blame the world for your ills, it's external. Alcoholics, drug addicts, they're going to be external. People who give up easily, they blame, my mother didn't breastfeed me when I was a baby, so therefore I can't be successful, or something like that. That's all, the kind of mentality that people with external locus of control have. And, we can take responsibility. Now, it's better to have internal. Now, if you have external, it's going to take a while to change that. You need to, start to think about how can I work on that and change it over a long period of time. It's harder than changing your body. So, if it takes 2 years to change your body, it takes 5 years to change your personality. It's going to be a very long process, and not everyone can do it. Very few people can. So I think locus of control, another one that really is better to have is tolerance of ambiguity. The idea of tolerance of ambiguity is not in your book, but I'm talking about it. Tolerance of ambiguity is that you're able to deal with uncertainty. You don't go crazy if circumstances become unclear, and it's time to move on, from the uncertainty. So you don't care. You say,
That
okay.
has to do with agreeableness and the big five.
Agreeableness is one of the big five, but that's
So
different.
that's tolerance of ambiguity.
Ambiguity. No, agreeableness means you're altruistic and you care about other people. Tolerance of ambiguity just means like, everything's going haywire and you're able to have composure and say, I'm not gonna,
Right. So someone
worry
that's
about it.
more agreeable would be more tolerant of ambiguity.
No, they're really not really linked. I mean, you can be agreeable and intolerant of ambiguity. If you're a very pleasant person, you care about other people, you do what everybody wants, you take care of people.
Yeah, then you would be more emotionally stable, to have the calmness
Yeah,
and
it's
collectiveness.
probably more closely linked to neuroticism. So there's always going to be overlap between various traits. Neuroticism or emotional stability probably will go hand in hand with tolerance of ambiguity. So, for example, if I once gave so we're talking about the big five, and I didn't really introduce that yet. So let me do that. So basically, the big five, very good. Josh. The big five personality traits have been studied by thousands of researchers. They're very well known, and a lot of industrial psychologists look at them. And basically, they are, first of all, neuroticism. So, you know, how emotionally stable you are. If you're very nervous, you worry about things. You know, like the character, if you watch the TV series, Curb Your Enthusiasm, Larry David, you know, is very funny, a comedian. His character in that movie is neurotic, you know, he's constantly getting irritated with people, very emotional, very imbalanced. He gets irritated about very small things and gets into fights with people all the time. That would be, you know, and it's part of the humor of the show. And that would be emotionally unstable character. So that's not, you know, this is another example of a character trait that you, in business, you probably don't want. If you have it, you can work on it. Okay, but it's hard to change. All right. Number two, extroversion. So the idea of extroversion is that you like to be with other people. So if you're somebody who enjoys the company of others, rather than being by yourself. If you're a loner, you don't like to be around others, you find other people annoying, intrusive, you'd rather stay home and watch television or you know, go on a jog by yourself. You're introverted. If you like being with other people, you're extroverted. Now, there are good kinds of jobs in both. So, you know, introverts will tend to do good in an accounting type job, in computer programming. They don't need to be around other people a lot. Extroverts more like sales and counter jobs and, you know, jobs that require HR and dealing with people. The third of the big five is openness. And that just means how open you are to change. It's a little bit like tolerance of ambiguity. So maybe if you compare neuroticism and openness, low neuroticism and high openness is likely you're going to be tolerant of ambiguity. Okay. So openness means you don't mind new experiences. Now, tolerance of ambiguity includes other kinds of ambiguity. So it's not just new experiences, but it would also be things like complexity, novelty, different kinds of problems. So if you feel very comfortable with complex sets of information that you have to tie together, that would be cognitive complexity. And that would also be associated with tolerance of ambiguity. Openness is one kind of tolerance of ambiguity, which would be that you're willing to experience new things and you don't have a lot of inhibitions about that. You love the new. Okay. The fourth one, agreeability, that Josh asked about, means that you're altruistic and that you're willing to help others. You like to help others. You're a helping person. So you're like a social worker or something, HR person. You want to help the employees. And number five, conscientiousness is probably the most important one for most jobs. Now, these have been tested against many kinds of jobs, and some are important for some jobs and others are important for other jobs. Like, you don't want to have too much agreeability and be a banker. All right, bankers have to say no to people. So you don't want to be too agreeable. I don't think agreeability is associated with success in finance, but it is associated with success in a field like social work or, you know, probably being a nurse or things like that. And then lastly, conscientiousness means that you're very dependable. And this has been shown, conscientiousness has been shown to be important in almost all jobs. Very high correlation between conscientiousness and life success. So all of these matter, and the big five, they're basically traits that were identified as important in many walks of life, and themes in literature and things people talk about, that these five traits play a big role. They've been studied in many studies, and by now probably tens of thousands of studies, and they found to be important in many jobs and many occupations. Okay. All right. Now, another one that's less established and more controversial is the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator. Your book talks about it. It's not as well validated as validated means that the test has been tested against outcomes, and there is a statistical predictive power to the test. Myers-Briggs is less validated, or may not be validated, but a lot of people are interested in it because it's so interesting. It's an interesting idea. It's supposedly based on Jungian psychology, and it has 4 dimensions. First of all, extrovert, introvert, and they spell it differently though. Now this is a slightly different kind of extroversion from the kind in the big five. That basically, the way Jung thought of extroversion was that it energizes people. And so extroversion in the Myers-Briggs context is that you're energized by being around people. The second dimensions are intuitive versus sensing. Intuitive versus sensing. So intuitive people like the big picture, sensing people are detail people. So you think in a big way, you're entrepreneurial, you're intuitive. If you look for the little points and try to create the whole from the detail, then you're sensing. Okay, and again, it's not better if you're sensing or intuiting, it's just different types of people. So like the big idea person, like Elon Musk, he would obviously be intuitive. He might also have some sensing traits. He probably thinks of a lot of details, but he's like a big picture guy. He's created all these major industries, PayPal, Tesla, the X space, and now X, and all these big ideas and big plans and so on. So that would be more intuiting, whereas sensing would be like detail people who make the computer program work or make the accounting system run smoothly, things like that. And then thinking versus feeling would be people who are very logical, who are thinking, and people who think with their gut, who are feeling. Do you think by logical deduction, or do you think by gut feel? And the last one, judging versus perceiving. That people who are judging tend to be very orderly, whereas people who are perceiving tend to be spontaneous. So the Myers-Briggs, when you take the Myers-Briggs, it gives you a type, like you could be ISFP or ESTP or whatever. I've taken it a few times and I've always come out ENTP. Okay, and people, there were this couple, Tiger and Tiger, who based a book, Do What You Are, on, Do What You Are, on the Myers-Briggs. So there's 16 possible types, and they talk about what types of professions each type is most likely to flourish in. Okay, you can take those online, and I recommend that you do. The Myers-Briggs is kind of fun. Like a lot of dating, like in dating, people, oh, I'm an ISFJ. Does that get along with it? It's kind of like astrology, So, you can take it to help you with dating. if that's if that's something you want. So basically, it's kind of a cocktail party kind of thing, the Myers-Briggs. All right, so I talked about the big five, I talked about the Myers-Briggs. The dark triad, all right, has nothing to do with Batman, the Dark Knight. The dark triad is the three traits that make people dishonest. Okay, so they call it the dark triad because it's like, they're people associated with bad people. But it turns out that many executives actually have some degree of some of these negative traits. I once interviewed a guy named Paul Babiak who wrote a book. He co-authored with probably the leading expert on the subject, a guy named Robert Hare. And I just want to show you this book. It's called Snakes and Suits. And it's a really excellent book, when psychopaths go to work. And they develop in there a model of workplace psychopathy. It's a fascinating subject. I've always known, I've always seen these people at work. Robert Hare, the second author, is mentioned in The Sopranos. If you've ever watched The Sopranos, in the third to last episode, Dr. Melfi is having dinner with a group of psychiatrists, including her own psychiatrist, and played by Peter Bogdanovich, one of the great 20th century film directors. He plays Dr. Melfi, psychiatrist in The Sopranos. And somebody in that dinner says, well, Robert Hare found, so they actually mentioned Robert Hare in The Sopranos, and I won't tell you more, I don't want to be a spoiler, but it must have been quite a kick for him. But in any case, what Babiak and Hare do is they create a model of workplace psychopathy, and they claim that workplace psychopaths take pleasure in setting employees against each other. So, and they also like to set employees against the boss, to set up the boss, to destroy the boss, and other things. Now, I'm not sure, based on this reading and based on my conversation with Paul Babiak and based on a few other articles I've read about psychopathy, that you can really have a meaningful instrument that talks about gradations of psychopathy. I'm not sure it can be measured in a linear way. And I'm not too sure that a psychological test will be good at it. Babiak and Hare devised the test, but it kind of is a yes or no, is this person a psychopath or isn't he? And basically the reason I think that is, psychopathy is basically being devoid of conscience. And you either have a conscience or you don't. Now, people have consciences in various ways. Some people might feel guilty if they, in fact, in The Sopranos, in The Sopranos, the story was that he if an animal was hurt, he would go crazy. He couldn't stand seeing an animal hurt. It hurt him. He would be so upset if an animal were hurt, he'd go crazy. But he had no qualms about killing a human being. So in one episode, his partner, one of his partners in crime, murders their racehorse in order to collect the insurance money. And he's so incensed, he goes to the guy's house and kills him, because he can't stand the idea that he killed a horse. And this might sound far-fetched and it's just TV, but this is how psychopaths are. I mean, there's no question Tony Soprano is meant to depict a psychopath, but the thing is that psychopaths often have like blind, they'll be very conscienceless about one thing, but have conscience about other things. And so you can measure a bunch of things and say, oh, they have conscience about X, Y, Z, but that one thing you didn't measure is what they don't have a conscience. So I'm not really sure you can measure it in a linear way, but your book talks about that they do have instruments that do that, and they claim that executives tend to have a moderate degree of psychopathy. I think what Babiak and Hare argued, and they wrote a research paper about this, is that in the public population, the general public, 2% of the public is psychopathic in their definition. Among executives, 8%. So it's 4 times as great among executives. And so, nobody doubts that there are a fair number of psychopaths among executives. Now, this usually will not find itself expressed in the extreme that the Theranos situation did. Elizabeth Holmes conned so many people out of their investments, claiming to have a cure that didn't exist. This is really insane. Imagining that you're not going to get caught eventually is insane in itself. But they ran, the case study goes into the story, and they would have the employees falsify the tests and stuff like that. And we're going to run across that similar story with the aircraft brake scandal, which is one of the cases I'm assigning. And you'll see in that case similarity to Theranos. But basically, so basically the dark triad, though, is not just psychopathy, it's 3 things: Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy. And basically, Machiavellianism is named after the political scientist Machiavelli, who basically said leaders, he wrote this famous book, The Prince. I hope you read it at some point in your lives if you haven't already. And what The Prince says is that 2 things: that what really matters is getting and keeping power, not morality. Okay, so what the prince should do is do what's necessary to get and keep power. It's a scientific question, not a moral question. And that's why a lot of people say he was the first modern political scientist. Okay, he wrote, I think, in the 1400s. Let me double check that. Machiavelli wrote The Prince, I believe it was in so he was born in 1469 and he died in 1527. The Prince came out, so it was in the 16th century, 1513, but close to the 1400s. So this is very early modernity. You would call this the Renaissance. And basically, he was born before Columbus found America. But you were already having a break with Aristotelian thinking, that this idea that the universe has a purpose, people are starting to question that. If the universe has a purpose and everything, and the religions took Aristotle and planted him in religion and said that Aristotle sees everything as serving a purpose, and of course the religion, the highest purpose is God, and so everything serves God. And this was the medieval mindset. But in The Prince, Machiavelli questions that, and he says the prince needs to do what's necessary to gain and keep power, not to serve God, not to do what's moral, not to do what's wise. Okay, Aristotle in the Nicomachean Ethics, which was a guidebook to the leaders of Athens, he meant it to be a training program, like a business school for the elite of Athens, how to govern. That morality was the balancing, that you need to balance good and bad, and the purpose of it was to achieve the good. Machiavelli says something totally different. What really matters is power. And this theme reemerges, if you read the book After Virtue by Alistair McIntyre, he basically says that we can have a community, that we can have an ethics only if we have a community. That community always only exists in relation to a community. And once you either ignore or debunk or say it doesn't exist or say it's not important, once you eliminate the community, then you eliminate the possibility of ethics. And that's what the Enlightenment did. The Enlightenment basically said, we want to find out what's true. And we're going to be completely ruthless about it. And the first thing, well, not the first thing, but by the 18th century, David Hume said, well, what do we really know about truth? And he said, basically, we don't know anything about truth. We do not know what truth is. And so we can't believe anything. We can't believe the law of cause and effect. We don't, just because I throw this pen up in the air doesn't mean that the pen flew up because I threw it. That there's no real proof of anything. And we don't know a thing. Well, this is insane. But if you want to limit everything to logic, that's where you go. Now, of course, people, when Hume wrote, he basically said there's no truth to ethics. They're two separate worlds, truth and ethics, two different universes. And he basically said, you can't derive an ought from an is. And so you can't show that there's any true basis for ethics. And this idea was echoed in the early 20th century by the philosopher G. Moore, who said, there's no such thing as an ethics in nature. There's no such thing as a naturalistic ethics. Now, I don't totally agree with that. I think that the reason we're ethical is that there are biological foundations for it. And you could say that there is a natural law, so I don't think the religions are wrong in saying that there's a natural law. But I would say that there's a strong relativistic element. And I don't think Hume is wrong. I don't think you can disprove Hume. Kant tried. So Kant, the response of Kant to Hume was that there is structure. We can never know the world as it exists outside our perception, but there's a structure to our perception that exists in our mind. And the only way we can know the world is through those perceptions. And we can create laws of regularity based on those perceptions. Okay. But it goes a little further, because then in the 20th century, we found out that there's a uncertainty principle of Heisenberg, and that the very perception of something changes that thing. So we can never know the universe as it exists, which was Kant's first argument, that he grants that to Hume. But the thing is, none of that can disprove Hume. Okay, you can't, I don't think you can disprove Hume. And so what basically that did, and I'm not criticizing Hume or condemning him or anything like that, but basically what that then means is that ethics is emotional. That's what Hume said, it's an emotion. And so emotion is the basis of ethics, and we all have different kinds of emotion, and we have to cultivate emotion and things like that. So, but you say, well, if that's true, does that mean that people who do whatever it takes to get power, or Machiavellian, are they no worse than people who always do the right thing and abide by ethics? And according to Hume, that answer is true.
So he would think taking advantage of people is equal to helping someone else? There's no point to it, it's all perceptual?
The only difference, there is a difference that you react to them emotionally in a different way. So it's sort of equivalent to like, if you go out to dinner with someone to an expensive restaurant and they say, I'm not going to use a knife and fork, I'm going to use my hands. And they start eating in the expensive restaurant with their hands, how would you feel? You'd be embarrassed, you'd feel terrible. And it's basically like that, it's something that goes against what you feel is right, that's appropriate, that you feel emotionally about, but there's no real moral grounding. Okay, it's not true or false. Now, so the other person could say, oh, I feel differently. I feel much better if I eat with my hands. I think it's morally better. There's no way out of that for Hume.
But wouldn't a positive response be elicited from many more people if it's ethical?
Say it again.
A positive reaction would be given if it's an ethical action. You know, if you're taking part in something ethical, you'll get a positive reaction in the community, and it would make a difference. It could help you in power.
That's right. So basically, ethics becomes whatever the general population wants it to be. But there's a lot of issues with that. I mean, that's not a solution. That just begs the question. Because basically what you then have to say is the general population ethical? Was the population of the world ethical when there was slavery? America wasn't the only country with slavery. Slavery existed everywhere in the world. So there was slavery everywhere. So the question is, was slavery ethical because everyone thought it was ethical?
And also, if it's an incentive mindset, you would say it doesn't have to be ethical. If it's in a type of incentive mindset to let's say,
Basically what you're saying is that if firms do whatever the public wants, then it's not a matter of ethics, it's just a matter of marketing. Okay, they're marketing their firm in a certain way for good or ill, just to please the public, and that's really no different from if they say tide whitens the whites and brightens the brights. That's no different from saying, well, we saved the whales. Those two things are not really different. They're just marketing arguments. Okay, so what they're basically saying, I saw in the movie The Fog of War here, and he talks about, when you watch his movie, McNamara, and you see his development, he talks about his early years, and he says, when he went to Berkeley and he studied philosophy, he realized there's something beyond himself. What Hume says is no, not only is there nothing beyond yourself, but yourself doesn't even exist. Yourself is an optical illusion, if you will, based on habit and memory and connecting diverse things. And you don't even exist as a single, he doesn't believe in anything is real. Okay, and you can't really disprove any of that. That's the thing. So maybe take a philosophy class, and maybe I'm inspiring you, and you can learn more about all this stuff. And basically, the question then is, what is really right or wrong? And are the people with the dark triad traits, psychopathy, Machiavellianism, and narcissism, are they any worse than the more honest people, the people without the dark triad traits? Now, the third of the dark triad, I mentioned Machiavellianism and psychopathy. I didn't mention narcissism. And narcissism just means self-love. From the Greek myth, Narcissus, that he saw a mirror and fell in love with himself or some such thing. And so narcissism means that people are engaged in self-love. Now, I've been reading this very interesting book. I'll show you the book on Amazon. Called the Psychology of Totalitarianism by a guy named Desmond. He's a Belgian guy. It's translated into English, and it's quite interesting. The psychology of totalitarianism. And he talks a little bit about, and in turn, he bases some of what he talks about on the great classic by Hannah Arendt, The Origins of Totalitarianism. Both are wonderful books. And she says this too, that the breakdown in morality. So if you go back to what I was talking about with Alistair McIntyre, that you can only have morality in a community. As the Enlightenment questioned the moral grounding of society and said religion is not necessarily true, that people evolved from the lower species, the origin of the species, and there's no heaven, there's only space, and so on and so forth. And there's the Big Bang theory, and all this kind of thing, that this basically disabused everyone of their moral grounding, and they had no more moral context. And then their entire lives became riddled with uncertainty. And also that this questioning of everything and breaking down of moral contexts led to an atomization, as in the atom, the nuclear atom, that basically there was an atomization of society, and people stopped having affiliations and stopped feeling connections to things because they were skeptical, because there was no real belief. And this increasing atomization of society led in turn to people's susceptibility to narcissism and people's susceptibility to totalitarianism. Okay, that to regulation, not totalitarian, well, to regulation. So what Desmond is saying is talking about regulation, not talking about where you already have totalitarianism, but where totalitarianism might form, that because people feel so much uncertainty, they see government regulation as the cure for their fears. And so they ask, please tell me to wear a mask. Please tell me to to get a vaccine. Please tell me to do this. Please tell me to do that. And so they want their entire lives increasingly regulated. And this in turn breaks down to the loss of moral context that people have experienced since the Enlightenment. Now, Arendt, in The Origins of Totalitarianism, which was published in 1951, was about the Nazis and Stalin. And basically what she says about both is that both systems, the Stalinist communism and the Nazi system, both depended heavily on atomization. And she talks about the forced starvation of the kulaks and Stalin's breaking down of all social contexts and turning the public into a herd of atoms. And that these atomized people then become prone to manipulation by the media. One of the things I was reading also about totalitarianism by Ludwig von Mises, The Omnipotent State, and he talks a little bit about the history of Nazi Germany too. He wrote this book in 1944, during the war. And he says basically that that the public was vulnerable to manipulation because the media was all controlled by Joseph Goebbels, and the people would get messages from all media sources telling them the same lies. And so we see this in America, and basically the two explanations, von Mises and Hannah Arendt, come from very different ideological perspectives, but they're both in a sense liberal, in the sense that they both value tolerance and freedom of speech and things like that. And what they're basically talking about is the same problem, that this was abolished. And what Arendt basically says is that the susceptibility to the media was because of the atomization of society. So people sit home and watch TV, and the TV then manipulates them into thinking the things they think. Okay, so getting back to that, now, naturally, that said, we see in our society today a huge increase in both narcissism and the taste for regulation, which is government control. I'm not saying regulation is the same thing as totalitarianism, but it's like a stepping stone to it. So you have more government telling you what to do, and you keep asking for more. The thirst is never quenched to be told what to do, and eventually they're telling you what to do all the time, and that is totalitarian. Okay, so that we have these tendencies because of the breakdown in morality. And I don't really have a solution to it. I don't know how this can be addressed, because it's too big a problem for me, to be honest. I just don't know what could be done about it. I don't think I haven't heard anyone come up with a solution that was really convincing either. So anyway, let's talk a little bit more about personality traits. What time do we have now? Oh, we still have a little time. So let's finish up the discussion on personality traits, and then I'll talk about then I'll take attendance. So basically, core self-evaluation is a combination of traits. So it includes self-esteem, efficacy, self-esteem meaning your respect for yourself, self-efficacy meaning that you're in control, you can get things done, you're competent, a sense of competence, locus of control that we already talked about, and
does it also have to do with capacity and capability? That your bottom line self-reflection, like self-value, your self-esteem, as you
self-esteem. I said self-esteem, and self-efficacy means that you feel you're competent, that you can get things done. Okay. Locus of control, meaning that you have internal locus of control. That means you can get things done. You feel that things are up to you. And also, what's the other one? There's another dimension. Locus of emotional stability. That you have people who are low in neuroticism tend to have strong core self-evaluation. So bottom line conclusions about themselves, people with core self-evaluation who are negative tend to dislike themselves. High self-evaluation tend to like themselves and feel that they're competent. Okay, self-monitoring describes an individual's ability to adjust their behavior to external situational factors, and it's related to adaptability, and it's part of emotional intelligence. So people who are able to monitor themselves are going to have good emotional intelligence. It's a part, understanding your reaction to other people, understanding your reaction to emotional cues. All of this is going to relate to self-monitoring. I'm sorry, to emotional intelligence. Another trait that's important is proactivity. Proactive personalities like to adjust their behavior to situations. They're adaptable. They're sensitive. And they have higher levels of performance and creativity. Teams with proactive members are more likely to be innovative. So a proactive person takes initiative, takes action, perseveres, and obviously related to entrepreneurship. Situations will modify personalities, and this has to do with trait activation theory. The idea of trait activation theory is that situations will increase certain personality traits. And the strength of a situation depends on its clarity and consistency. And basically, constraint to the extent that a person's individual freedom is constrained, their personality traits will be minimized. To the extent that the situation strength, that their decision making is not constrained, then they will be their personality traits will be activated. Certain situations activate certain traits. Jobs that encourage creativity and differences in openness are more likely to make people creative, for example. All right, another trait that we should talk about that's very important is cognitive ability. So basically, cognitive ability refers to what's often known as IQ. A lot of people say cognitive ability, there's no such thing, it doesn't matter, it's not real, and that's not true. There is such a thing as cognitive ability. It just means that you're a little quicker at solving problems. The IQ tests tend to measure the speed of problem solving. So people who are very quick at problem solving are going to come up with higher scores. And that doesn't mean that you can't, just because you're a little slower, doesn't mean you can't come up with a better answer in the end. But on average, people who are quicker will come up with better answers. So that's just the idea. So is it a perfect measure? No. Does it correlate with job performance? The answer is yes. Okay, so cognitive ability does correlate with job performance. This is very well documented. And firms are justified in giving IQ tests. Hello, I think that just has to be muted. That they firms are justified in giving IQ tests as selection mechanisms because people with higher IQs tend to perform better. That doesn't mean that in all cases, the higher the IQ, the better they perform. That would be impossible. But it does mean that there's a correlation. It means that there's some rough association between the two. It's not one-on-one. Nobody ever claimed that. So basically, we should also mention the importance of values, terminal values versus instrumental values. Terminal values emphasize end states, while instrumental values emphasize modes of behavior. So if you think about, is it right or wrong to do something, that's an instrumental value. Like, is it right or wrong for the company to enter a new market? Is that morally right or morally wrong? That would be an instrumental value. The question of, is it moral to make a profit? Is the firm's aim to make a profit? Is that moral? That would be a terminal value question. Okay, so in your life, what is your goal? If your goal is to make as much money as possible, making money is your terminal value. If your goal is to world peace, then world peace is your terminal value. If your goal is to make more friends, then friendship is your terminal value. Okay, whereas if in trying to make money, you bend the rules, is that moral? That's an instrumental value question. All right, so we have both kinds of values, and values are extremely important, whether you agree with Hume that they're just emotional, or whether you agree with the religions that they're founded in God and that, you know, we're bound to honor them, or you agree with Kant that they're fundamentally logical. Whatever your take on it, morality and values are very, very important. And if you don't share values with your coworkers, you're unlikely to get along with them. Studies find that there's a higher rate of intermarriage between different racial categories than there is between Democrats and Republicans. So more people have interracial marriages than there are, in other words, a higher percentage of marriages are interracial than are marriages between Democrats and Republicans. So basically, values play an incredibly important role. And, obviously your political views are part of that. And people who disagree on political things likely don't agree on other values. And so those things are all interconnected. I think there's more to it than just values. I think it's more complicated because Democrats and Republicans hate each other. And basically, there's that whole competitive thing. All right, so one last point. We've had in the past since World War II. So World War II was in 1945, it ended. So it was basically 78 years ago that World War II ended, and we have had, there was the World War II generation, sometimes called the Great Generation, the Greatest Generation. I think there's sometimes also called the Silent Generation. It was always a different one, but the Greatest Generation. And then the baby boomers from 1946, born to 64, and then Generation X from 65 to 80. Many of you are probably children of Generation Xers, I would think. And then the millennials from 81 to 2000. Some of you are probably millennials, and then most of you are probably Generation Z, which would be 2001 to 2022, I think. I'm not sure if we're in a new one now, but that would be like little babies now. So basically, I think many discussions are overblown. I think technology has played a role in creating some differences. My generation was the generation of TV. It was when TV was still new. And we watched a lot of TV. I think Generation X was more like video games and the beginnings of the personal computer. The millennials were, so you're talking people born in 2000. So, that's more like cell phones and the computer and cell phones. And then Generation Z is more like the smartphones and, TikTok and all that. And I think these technologies create personality differences to a degree, but I don't think people are all that different. There are differences. I think the education system has created some differences. I think there's like a much higher rate of neuroticism now, from what I can see. Like there are schools where they have like safe spaces because the kids are so nervous, and they have like someone was telling me that at Vassar, I live up in the Hudson Valley. I work out in Kingston, which is not far, and this guy works at Vassar, and he was telling me that at Vassar, they have like a safety pack that they give the kids. So, I don't know what it has in it, but like children's candy and a pacifier, I don't know what. And so basically this is like meant to calm people down if they're too nervous. This is the kind of nonsense they're generating these days. And, they had there's a lot of talk about safe spaces and all this. And a lot of this stuff is really nutty. I think the people advocating these kinds of things are belong in the mental asylum, to be honest. But there was a book by Greg Lukianoff, and what was that book called? By Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt. I know them both, and it was a very good, The Coddling of the American Mind, and basically what they say in there is that the kids have been encouraged to have these like overblown nervous tendencies and things like that. And this is not education to me. This is miseducation, or not anti-education. It's not education. And I think there needs to be reform in the schools if they're doing stuff like that. So anyway, and I'll talk a little bit about the general economy. We have a few minutes, and I'll take attendance. What's going on in the world? What's going on right now? Well, let's first narrow it down. what's happening in China now? Who knows? In the Chinese economy. Do you read?
They're switching currencies to the BRICS.
All right, there's talk about that. They haven't done it yet. That's a very long-term thing. It might happen maybe in a few years. Yeah, they're beginning it. You're right. So yeah, but what's happening today in China? Nuts and bolts, real life stuff. What's happening to the Chinese economy? What's happened to the Chinese stock market? Let me ask you that. Does anyone know? Okay, so let's.
It crashed.
Yeah, it's going down, I think. I don't even know. I'll look at it. I'm pretty sure it's going down. So let's look at this. What it's called what the Hang Seng. Is that the Chinese market?
Is this because they're overextending their reach into places that really they shouldn't be?
Yeah, okay. Well, there's a huge conflict between China and the US right now. And Europe is very upset also. Europe is very upset. So the Chinese have been pushing people around a little bit more. So let's see what the market, yeah, so you see this was, you start here in May, they ended the lockdown around May, I forget the exact time. So this is the Shanghai stock index. And back here it was 3404. And here it's 3146. So it's gone down about 10%. More importantly than that is that there's a huge youth unemployment problem in China. It's so bad. There was a lot of news last week that the Chinese have stopped revealing youth unemployment statistics. They're no longer talking about it. The youth unemployment rate, so that means like people your age, has been as high as 25% in the cities. Of course, it's always different in the country. Unemployment doesn't mean as much when you're talking about rural areas because the kids can work on the farm. And farming is amorphous. There's a lot you can do, and it doesn't mean as much. So unemployment becomes more important when people live in the city and they depend on a job. And the unemployment rate among young Chinese has been skyrocketing. As well, there's huge problems with bankruptcies. I forget the names of the firms. This big real estate company just went bankrupt. I think it's called Country something, Country Estates or something like that. Country Garden. Okay. And they're having okay, so they're having huge, you see here on the web, Country Garden property. I don't know what the source this is, but it doesn't really matter, just talking about it. That they're having huge problems. Another one, Evergrande, already went bankrupt. And there's a bank there that's very, very close to bankruptcy, and the bankruptcy could be, it's as bad a situation and probably bigger financially than FTX was. I forget the name of the bank, something like Zhang Ran or something like that. And it hasn't fallen yet, but it's very close, and huge bankruptcy problems and misallocation of resources. Now, a lot of this is arguably related to the rise of the dollar, okay? And that is not necessarily a good thing. And what has happened? What has the Fed been doing? What has Jerome Powell been doing in the Federal Reserve Bank? Does anyone know? What what has the Fed been doing in the US?
The interest rates?
Yes,
Or-
the Fed is in charge of interest rates and the amount of money in circulation.
Inflationary reports?
Okay, so what happened to inflation in the US in the last 3 years?
It's gotten to a point where the money is purchasing power now is much greater than in the future.
You have less purchasing power, you mean?
Yeah, but due to inflation.
Okay, so prices have gone up and you have less purchasing power. Okay, there's been a lot of inflation, and the way you stop that is by raising interest rates. Okay, and Powell has been raising interest rates for the last year and a half relentlessly. We went from almost 0% and now interest rates are like over 5% for the treasury bonds, I think, are 4% on the 10-year and even more on the 2-year. And this, that the short-term rates are higher is called an inverted yield curve, which is very bad for future economic conditions. So if you look at the current interest rate on the treasury bonds, the 2-year. All right, I'm looking for what the number is. 2-year treasury rate. The current 2-year treasury rate is now 4.87%. A year ago, it was basically zero. So you're talking a huge increase in interest rates. Now, on the one hand, if you have your money in the bank, you're going to collect more interest than you used to. On the other hand, that makes it very difficult for people to borrow, which in turn is likely to cut back on economic activity and could result in a recession. So this raising of the interest rates, what that's likely to do, capital from overseas is going to say, oh, we can make a higher rate in America, so there's more capital going to flow into America. That will take capital away from other countries, including likely China. And what you're going to see there is a weakening of other countries' economies as capital comes here. They're going to have to then raise their rates. And if they raise their rates, then a lot will break. Okay, a lot of things will break. Companies will go bankrupt. Europe will be thrown into high unemployment and so on. So now the thing is that Powell is doing this not because he's a bad guy, but because he wants to end inflation. Okay, so we'll talk more about that in the future. You should have an understanding of that. I mean, you're business students and you should understand how the Fed affects interest rates, what the effects of the Fed are on the stock market, on income inequality, on wages and the like. Okay, Mohammed Afzal, are you here? Mohammed Afzal, Nabia Ahmed.
Here.
Okay, you're free to leave after I call your name because it's almost 9:30. Rima Akhtar. Rima. Omar Ali. Chastity Aquino.
Here.
Have a nice week.
Thank you,
Nita,
too.
thank you. You too. Nita Aslam.
Here.
Have a nice week. Natali Ben Yosef. Natali. Ariana Besesser. Ariana. Okay, I have Nita. Okay, Ariana Besesser, is Ariana here? Okay, again, Natalie, is Natalie here? Alicia Brooks,
Here.
okay, have a nice week. Anthony Castaneda,
I'm here, Professor.
okay, Anthony, have a nice week.
Thank you, too.
Jurika Cepeda. Jurika. Alea Charlton,
Here.
have a nice week, Alea.
You too.
Soraya Chowdhury,
I'm here, Professor.
have a nice week.
You too. Thank you.
Welcome. Glory Christian. Glory Christian. Crystal Clark,
Here, Professor.
okay. Crystal is here. Elizabeth Desai. Elizabeth. Chinyan Ding,
I'm here.
have a nice week, Chinyan.
You too.
Vladimir Duval Saint,
I'm here.
have a nice week. Benvante Fogler,
Here.
have a nice week.
Thank you.
Welcome, Jordan, Glenn Williams. Jordan. Dipu Hossein,
Yes, I'm here.
have a nice week. Zinan Huang,
Here.
have a nice week.
Thank you, Professor.
You're welcome. Tanya Ingram. Tanya Ingram. Prince Andy Isaac. I know he was here. Nikita Conan. Nikita. Yi-Lin. Karen Liu,
I'm here. Good night, Professor.
good night. Emin Malik,
Here. Have a good night.
you too. Josh is here. Patrice,
Professor, have a good night.
you too. Patrice,
I'm here.
okay, Patrice, have a nice evening. Jinran May. Alexandra Melendez,
Here, Professor.
have a nice week.
Thank you.
Afra No Man,
I'm here, Professor.
okay. Omar, Deanna Pierre Louise. Miftahal Proga. Woming Kwan.
I'm here. Good night, Professor.
Okay, have a nice week, Woming.
Have a nice
Asif Rahman. Rafikar Rahman.
I'm here, Professor. Good
Have
night.
a nice week, Rafikar.
Thank you.
Safayat Rahman. Safayat. Okay, Robert Rubino. Robert. Mohammed Sarwar. Lauren Segal.
Here.
Margarita Sherback.
I'm here, Professor. Have a nice weekend.
You too. Hafsa Siddiqui.
Here. Have a good night.
You too. Giovanni Simon. Chanel Sterling,
Here.
Janiton Awardi.
Here, Professor.
Have a nice week. Sanzita Sanzita Tanya. Okay. Israel Telpa. Israel.
I'm here, Professor. Good night.
Have a good night, Israel. Makeda Tony. Abigail Tuachi. Ghazi Udin.
I'm here, Professor.
Have a nice week, Ghazi.
Have a nice weekend.
Ashley Vasquez. Yoland Wildman.
Present, Professor.
Have
Have
a
a
nice
great
week.
week. Thanks.
Joyce Wuxi.
Here, Professor.
Have a nice week, Joyce.
You too.
Haorong Jian.
Yes, I'm here, Professor. Good night.
Good night, sir. Xiao Hua Yan.
I'm here, Professor.
Have a nice week.
You
And
too.
thank you. And Charles Ruan.
I'm here.
Okay, have a nice week. All right, I'm going to call off the names of people I did not call yet. If you're here, let me know. Mohammed Afzal, Rima Akhtar, Omar Ali, Natali Ben Yosef.
Yeah, Professor. I just went to the bathroom, but I'm here.
Okay, all right. Gotcha. Ariana Besesser, Jerica Cepeda, Glory Christian, Elizabeth Desai, Jordan Glenn Williams, Tanya Ingram, Nikita Conan, Yi Lin, Zinrang May, Amar Omar, Deanna Pierre Louise, Asif Rahman, Safayat Rahman, Robert Rubino, Mohammed Sarwar, Giovanni Simon, Sanzita Tanya, Makeda Tony, Abigail Tuachi, Ashley Vasquez. Are any of those people here? Okay, any questions before I go?
Yes, I have questions. I would like to know, do you want responses on the discussion boards? Like a reply? I'm so sorry, my headphone died. Can you hear me, Professor?
Yeah. Was there a discussion board due tonight other than was the Enron one due?
Yes, Enron is due tonight, and I just wanted to know if we needed to
I
reply
forgot
to another
mention
student.
that. Okay, I'll send an email around just to remind people. So answer the questions on the discussion board.
No, but we don't need to reply to another student.
If you want to, if you have something important, I mean, don't do it for its own. I don't like when people say, "Oh, yes, Joe, you made a good point." But I mean, if you have a real reason to do it, then yes. Otherwise, no.
Okay, good. And then also, in reference to the presentation that we have to do next week, do you have is the details of that presentation on the syllabus or your announcements or anything like that?
Okay, so I said the goal setting presentation to tomorrow. I thought that was the 24th. Am I wrong?
I think you're right.
Let me check that. Let me check that. I'm gonna go right on to the oh, maybe I have the syllabus downloaded. I'm looking on a laptop. I might actually have it in. Let's see. No, I don't, let me look it up online. Um. Okay, portal, okay, first. Okay, I'm looking at the Blackboard now. So this would be, okay, so let me just look at the syllabus. So, oh, what did I do? I skipped a week.
I think it's the next assignment coming up in general. I don't know the exact date, but I think the next assignment is the presentation.
I left out September 10th on the syllabus. What the hell was I thinking?
Oh,
So let me check, you know, I can look at the discussion board itself. Okay, yeah, so the Enron one is due tonight. Okay, so 47 people have already participated. So what was your other question? When is the goal?
what's the details of the goal setting or presentation assignment?
Okay, so the goal setting one is
I just need to know what I need to say, I guess, when I'm presenting.
you know, I don't know, I don't see the. Oh, yeah, the 24th. So basically, you need to, if you don't do the in-class presentation, you can do the goal setting exercise on the discussion board.
But
And
where's the details? Oh, sorry to cut you off.
so
Okay.
you just need to talk about your mission, what you want to achieve in life, what will what you wish to contribute to society. You want to state the terminal instrumental values that guide you and state your goals for what you will achieve 5 years after graduation. Okay, and you can
Okay.
give a brief talk online.
Is that written down anywhere or, okay, so mission.
Well, if you
I'm
look
gonna
at the
write-
Blackboard, it's on there.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure if I put it on the course syllabus. Let me look. God, I forgot, I screwed up. I forgot the 10th. All right, so we're gonna move up, the chapters on, diversity and, job attitudes. But basically, if you look at the discussion board and, for the 24th, there's a required discussion board. Actually, it's not a required discussion board, because you can do it in class. But
Mhm.
it's an optional discussion board on goal setting, and that's what you have to talk about,
Okay, thank you.
okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. Have a good night.
You too. Someone else want to talk to me, or is that it, Deanna? All right, have a good night, everyone.